The blue glow from my laptop screen cast eerie shadows across our bedroom at 3 in the morning. Amy lay beside me, breathing deeply in that fake, peaceful way she'd perfected over the past 6 months. Her phone buzzed constantly on the nightstand. Work emergencies, she always claimed. Right. I'm Jack Harlan, 38 years old, and I fix things for a living. Not the romantic kind of fixing. I restore old electronics, digitize family memories, recover lost data. It's methodical work that requires patience and attention to detail. Skills that apparently translate well to uncovering lies. The external drive I'd found buried in Amy's desk drawer was labeled Tax Documents 2018. Innocent enough. But tax documents don't usually require password protection, and they certainly don't get hidden behind false partition walls that most people wouldn't know how to create. Amy wasn't most people, though. She worked in IT security for Henderson Financial. She knew her way around computers, knew how to hide things. What she didn't know was that I'd been recovering deleted files since before she learned to code. The first video file made my stomach drop. Timestamp 6 months ago. Location, our bedroom. Participants, my wife Amy and my brother Ethan. The camera angle suggested it was hidden in the decorative plant on Amy's dresser, the one she'd insisted on buying last spring. I watched without sound first, clinical and detached. Then I put in earbuds and listened to my wife of 8 years tell my brother how Jack never pays attention anymore, and how this feels so right. Ethan, golden boy Ethan with his successful contracting business and his pregnant wife Marissa, nodded along like the entitled bastard he'd always been. There were 47 more files. I copied everything to a secure drive, then sat back in my chair. Amy stirred beside me, mumbling something about the light. I closed the laptop and stared at the ceiling, my mind already working through possibilities. Most men would confront them immediately. Scream, throw punches, file for divorce, and split everything down the middle while the lawyers got rich. But I'm not most men. I fix things properly, methodically, with attention to every detail. By dawn, I had a plan. Morning, honey, Amy said, stretching as sunlight filtered through our curtains. She looked beautiful in that soft morning light. The same face I'd fallen in love with in college, before life taught me that beautiful people often have the ugliest secrets. Morning, I replied, already dressed and ready for the day. I was thinking we should have a family dinner this Sunday. It's been too long since everyone got together. Amy sat up, suddenly alert. Everyone? Your parents, mine, Ethan and Marissa. Maybe little Sarah if she's feeling up to it. I kept my voice casual, but I was watching her face carefully. I'll cook that roast you love. That's really sweet, Jack. But Sunday's kind of short notice, don't you think? I already called around this morning. Everyone's free. Seems like fate. The lie came easily. I hadn't called anyone yet, but I would. And they'd all come, because that's what families do. They show up for each other, especially when they're about to watch everything fall apart. Amy's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and I caught the flash of panic in her eyes, before she forced a smile. Work? I asked. Yeah, just, you know how it is. I knew exactly how it was. The timestamp on that text would match the metadata on video file number 32, where she and Ethan discussed their Tuesday afternoon meetings at the Riverside Motel. I'll start calling everyone about Sunday, I said, heading for the door. This is going to be memorable. Tony Del Vecchio had been my best friend since high school, back when we were both scrawny kids who spent our lunch money on electronics magazines instead of food. Now he managed Brennan's hardware store and knew everyone's business in our small Connecticut town of Millbrook. You're sure about this, Jack? Tony asked, examining the wireless camera system I'd asked him to order. Because once you light this fuse, there's no putting it out. The fuse was lit 6 months ago, I replied, testing the camera's connection to my phone. I'm just making sure everyone gets to see the fireworks. We were in the back room of the hardware store, surrounded by boxes of screws and paint cans. Tony had closed early so we could work without interruption. The beauty of small towns. Everyone trusts everyone else, right up until they shouldn't. What about Marissa? Tony asked. She just had the baby 3 months ago. This is going to destroy her. Ethan should have thought about that before he decided to screw my wife in my bed while his wife was recovering from childbirth. Tony winced. Jesus, Jack. When you put it like that, that's exactly how it is. I finished configuring the camera and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Marissa deserves to know what kind of man she married, just like I deserve to know what kind of woman I married. Move the pilikulkas, lady. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. Sunday dinner. All the family gathered around our dining room table. I'd set up the camera to record everyone's reactions, then play Amy's little home movies on our big screen TV. No confrontation beforehand, no chance for them to spin the story or play victim. Just cold, hard evidence presented to the people whose opinions mattered most. Move the bilik aside, Ev, Tony asked. You thought about what happens next? One thing at a time. I headed for the door. Right now, I need to go home and play the loving husband for 3 more days. The house felt different when I walked in, like a stage set waiting for the final act. Amy was in the kitchen, actually cooking for once, probably guilt driving her to play housewife. She looked up when I entered, and for just a moment, I saw the woman I'd married. Then I remembered video file number 12, where she'd laughed about how clueless I was. How was your day? She asked, stirring something that smelled like her mother's famous pasta sauce. Productive, I confirmed Sunday with everyone. Your parents are driving up from Hartford, mine are bringing dessert, and Ethan said he and Marissa wouldn't miss it. Amy's spoon stopped stirring. Marissa's coming? With the baby? Of course. Why wouldn't she? It's just, she's been so tired lately, new mom and all. I'll bet she has been tired. Caring for a newborn while her husband sneaks around behind her back would exhaust anyone. But that was about to change. She sounded excited when I talked to her. I lied smoothly. Said it would be good to get out of the house. Amy nodded, but I could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. She was probably already planning how to warn Ethan, maybe suggest he find an excuse not to come. Too bad for them. I'd already thought of that. Oh, and I told everyone to leave their phones in the car, I added casually. You know how these family dinners go. Everyone's staring at screens instead of talking to each other. I want this to be special. Leave their phones in the car? Amy's voice pitched higher. That seems a bit extreme, don't you think? Not extreme, intentional. When's the last time our families actually talked to each other without distractions? I moved closer, putting my arms around her waist like I used to when we were happy. I want to remember this dinner for the rest of my life. That part, at least, was completely true. Amy leaned into me, and for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Then I thought about the timestamps on those videos. All the nights she'd come home late with elaborate stories about work emergencies and client dinners. All the times I'd worried about her, called to check if she was safe, while she was in a motel room with my brother. I love you, Jack, she whispered against my chest. I know, I replied, because what else was there to say? 3 more days. Then everyone would know exactly what Amy's love was worth. Sunday morning arrived gray and cold, typical November weather in Connecticut. Perfect for staying indoors with family, sharing a meal, and watching home movies. I'd been awake since 5, preparing everything with the precision of a military operation. The roast was in the oven, the dining room table extended to accommodate 8 people, and my laptop sat ready in the living room, connected to the 75-inch TV Amy had insisted we buy last Christmas. You're up early, Amy said, padding into the kitchen in her robe. She looked nervous, had been for days. Kept checking her phone, whispering into it when she thought I wasn't listening. Big day, I replied, basting the roast. Want to make sure everything's perfect. The first guests arrived at noon. Amy's parents, Richard and Linda Morrison. Richard was a retired bank manager who'd never quite approved of his daughter marrying a repair technician, as he always called me. Linda was the type of woman who measured her worth by her daughter's achievements and her son-in-law's paycheck. Jack! Linda embraced me with the enthusiasm she reserved for family gatherings. Something smells wonderful. Just trying to live up to Amy's standards, I said, helping them with their coats. My parents arrived next. Frank and Marie Harlan, both in their 70s, both still sharp as tacks. Dad had worked construction his whole life. Mom had raised 3 boys while managing the household finances. They knew the value of hard work and honest dealing. Where's that brother of yours? Dad asked, settling into his usual chair in the living room. He'll be here, I assured him. Marissa's still getting used to going out with the baby. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Ethan stood on my front porch, holding his 3-month-old daughter, while Marissa gathered the diaper bag from their car. He looked good, successful, confident, like a man who'd never doubted his place in the world. That was about to change. Jack! Ethan clapped me on the shoulder with his free hand. Thanks for doing this, man. We've all been so busy lately. I'll bet you have, I replied, taking little Sarah from his arms. She was beautiful, with Marissa's dark hair and Ethan's blue eyes. Innocent in all of this, which made what I was about to do both necessary and heartbreaking. Marissa looked exhausted, but happy to be out of the house. She'd been my friend long before she married Ethan, back in college when we'd all run in the same circles. She deserved better than what she'd gotten. "This is so nice, Jack," she said, kissing my cheek. "I can't remember the last time we all got together like this." 6 months, I said quietly. "It's been exactly 6 months. Dinner went smoothly. Too smoothly." Amy kept glancing at Ethan, who kept checking his watch. My parents told stories about their grandchildren. Amy's parents complained about their neighbors, and Marissa bounced little Sarah on her lap while trying to eat one-handed. Normal family chaos. The kind of scene I'd always loved, back when I thought I belonged in it. "Before dessert," I announced, standing up from the head of the table, "I wanted to share something special with everyone." Amy's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Jack, what? It's a little anniversary video I put together," I continued, already moving toward the living room. 6 months of memories I thought everyone should see. "Anniversary?" Richard frowned. "Your anniversary isn't until March." "Not that anniversary." I picked up the laptop, fingers steady despite my racing heart. A different kind of milestone. The TV screen flickered to life, showing our media player interface. I'd organized everything into a single playlist, 47 files, arranged chronologically, with clear timestamps and dates. "Jack, stop!" Amy's voice was sharp with panic. She started to rise from her chair, but I was already clicking play. The first video filled the screen. High definition, crystal clear audio, unmistakably our bedroom. The timestamp read 6 months ago to the day, the same day Marissa had brought little Sarah home from the hospital. The silence in the room was absolute. Amy lunged for the TV, but I'd positioned myself between her and the screen. "Everyone should see the whole thing," I said calmly. "Turn it off." Ethan was on his feet, face white as paper. "Jack, turn it off right now." But I'd disabled the remote control, hidden the power cord behind furniture that would take time to move. Every detail planned, every contingency covered. On screen, Amy was telling Ethan how good he made her feel, how she'd never experienced anything like this with her husband, how Jack was so focused on his work that he never noticed anything anymore. "You son of a bitch," Richard Morrison whispered, staring at his daughter on the screen. Linda Morrison made a sound like a wounded animal. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. My father's face went stone cold, the expression I remembered from childhood when one of us had done something unforgivable. Marissa sat frozen, still holding her baby, watching her husband betray her in high definition. "It's not what it looks like," Amy said desperately, but the words sounded hollow even to her. On screen, she was straddling my brother, telling him she loved him, asking when they could be together for real. 6 months, I said conversationally, as if discussing the weather. 47 separate encounters, every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, plus 3 weekend sessions when I was supposedly at trade shows. Ethan made a move toward the laptop, but my father stepped in front of him. "You sit down and watch what you've done," Dad said in a voice I'd never heard before. "You watch every goddamn second." The video continued. Audio of Amy complaining about how boring I was, how she deserved better. Ethan agreeing, talking about how he'd always been the successful brother, how he deserved to have what he wanted. Marissa finally spoke, her voice barely a whisper. "Sarah was in the NICU. She was fighting for her life, and you were." She couldn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Linda Morrison slapped her daughter across the face, the sound sharp as a gunshot. "You whore. You disgusting whore. Mom, please, don't you dare." Richard's voice shook with rage. "Don't you dare try to explain this away." The video played on. More sessions, more betrayals, more intimate details of how my wife and brother had been laughing at me for months, planning their future together, discussing how to handle the Jack problem when the time came. Amy was crying now, makeup running down her cheeks. Ethan sat with his head in his hands, shoulders shaking. My mother walked over to Marissa, gently took the baby from her arms. "Come on, sweetheart," she said softly. "Let's get Sarah out of here." But Marissa didn't move. She was staring at the screen with an expression I'd never seen before. Pure, cold fury. "How long?" she asked. 6 months, I repeated. "No." Her voice was getting stronger. "How long have you known?" 1 week. She nodded slowly, then stood up and walked to the kitchen. She came back carrying the carving knife I'd used for the roast. "Marissa, no." Ethan scrambled backward. "Please, let me explain." "Explain what?" She wasn't shouting, wasn't crying. Her voice was deadly calm. "Explain how you fucked your brother's wife while I was in the hospital with our daughter. Explain how you risked our family, our marriage, our child's future for 6 months of sneaking around. It didn't mean anything. It meant everything." The facade cracked, and her pain came pouring out. "It meant more to you than your wedding vows, more than your daughter, more than me." She raised the knife, and for a moment I thought she might actually use it. Instead, she brought it down on the dining room table, embedding it deep in the wood. "I want you out of our house tonight," she said. "I want you gone, forever." The video was still playing. Amy tried once more to reach the TV, but her father grabbed her arm. "You'll sit and watch," he said. "You'll watch what you've done to this family." By the time it ended, 47 files, 2 hours and 18 minutes of betrayal. The room looked like a battlefield. Amy huddled in her chair, mascara streaking her face. Ethan sat on the floor where he'd collapsed, staring at nothing. My parents stood together by the window, my mother still holding little Sarah, both of them looking older than they had that morning. Richard and Linda Morrison whispered furiously to each other, occasionally shooting disgusted looks at their daughter. And Marissa stood over her husband, with the carving knife still in her hand, waiting. "It's over," I said finally, closing the laptop. "Dinner's over, marriage is over, family is over." I looked around the room at the wreckage of 8 years of my life. Everyone knows the truth now. Everyone sees exactly who you are. Amy tried to speak, but no words came out. Ethan finally looked up at me. "Jack, you what?" I cut him off. "You're sorry? You didn't mean for it to happen. It just got out of hand?" He said nothing. "Get out of my house," I said quietly. "Both of you. Get out and don't come back." The week after the dinner felt like living in a different town. Millbrook had always thrived on gossip, but this was something special. A scandal juicy enough to keep the coffee shops and hair salons buzzing for months. I'd moved into Tony's apartment above the hardware store temporarily, leaving Amy to rattle around our house alone. The divorce papers were already filed, with copies of the videos as evidence. My lawyer said it would be the easiest adultery case he'd ever handled. "You sure you don't want to go for alimony?" he'd asked. "With evidence this clear, you could probably get her to pay you." But I didn't want Amy's money. I just wanted her gone. Ethan had moved into the Riverside Motel, the same place where he and Amy had conducted their affair. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in town. Marissa had changed the locks on their house within hours of the dinner and filed for divorce the next morning. Her lawyer was seeking full custody of Sarah, plus the house, the business, and everything else Ethan had worked for. "Heard Amy got fired," Tony said, restocking shelves while I helped with inventory. "Henderson Financial doesn't like their IT security people having compromising videos floating around." I wasn't surprised. The videos had somehow found their way to several key people in town. Amy's boss, Ethan's business partners, members of both families' social circles. Not through me, of course. I'd been very careful to keep the originals secure. But small towns have a way of spreading information, especially when that information is as explosive as 2 hours of high-definition adultery. "She's been calling," I admitted. 15 times yesterday, 23 times today. "You gonna talk to her?" Nothing to say. But Amy didn't see it that way. She showed up at the hardware store Thursday afternoon, looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her usually perfect hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled, her eyes red and swollen. "Jack, please," she said, ignoring Tony and the 3 customers who suddenly found the paint samples fascinating. "We need to talk." "No, we don't. I made a mistake." "You made 47 mistakes." I didn't look up from the invoice I was checking. "Over 6 months. That's not a mistake, Amy. That's a choice. It didn't mean anything." Now I did look up, and she stepped back at whatever she saw in my face. "It meant everything," I said, echoing Marissa's words from Sunday. "It meant more to you than 8 years of marriage, more than the promises you made, more than the life we built together." She was crying again, but I felt nothing. The man who would have comforted her, who would have done anything to make her happy, had died Sunday afternoon watching those videos. "I love you," she whispered. "No, you don't. You love the idea of not being alone. You love having someone to pay the bills while you figure out your next move. But you don't love me. If you did, you never would have done this." The customers had given up any pretense of shopping and were openly staring now. Amy noticed and flushed with embarrassment. "Can we at least talk privately? Everything I needed to know about you was in those videos. Everything you really thought about me, about our marriage, about our future. You said it all to my brother while you were screwing him in our bed." She flinched like I'd hit her. "The divorce papers are on the kitchen table," I continued. "Sign them. Take your clothes and whatever else you had before we got married and go. That's all there is left to discuss." Amy stood there for another moment, then turned and walked out. Through the window, I watched her sit in her car for 5 minutes, crying into her hands. Then she drove away. "Damn, Jack," said Bill Henderson, one of the customers. "That was cold." "And that was necessary," I replied. Friday brought a different kind of confrontation. I was closing up the shop when Ethan appeared, looking as bad as Amy had. His golden boy confidence was gone, replaced by something desperate and ugly. "We need to talk," he said. "No, we don't. I'm your brother. You were my brother. Now you're just some guy who screwed my wife." He followed me as I locked up, his voice getting more agitated. "You don't understand what it was like. Amy came to me. She said you two were having problems. Stop." I turned to face him. "Just stop. I've heard your excuses already, remember? They're all on video. And that's not fair." "Fair," I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you decided my marriage was something you could just take? Was it fair when you were planning how to handle the Jack problem, while I was working 60-hour weeks to pay for the house where you were screwing my wife?" Ethan's face crumpled. "I never meant for it to go this far. But it did go that far, for 6 months. And the only reason it stopped is because I found out. If I hadn't, you'd still be meeting at that motel, still be planning your future together, still be laughing about how stupid I was. What do you want from me?" he asked desperately. "What can I do to fix this?" "Nothing. There's nothing you can do, nothing you can say, nothing you can give me that will fix this. You broke something that can't be repaired." I started walking toward Tony's apartment, but Ethan grabbed my arm. "Please, Jack. I've lost everything. Marissa won't let me see Sarah. The business is falling apart. I'm living in a goddamn motel." "Good." The word came out flat and cold, and Ethan dropped his hand like I'd burned him. "You deserve to lose everything," I continued. "You made a choice to destroy your family and mine. Now you get to live with the consequences." "You're enjoying this," he said, and for the first time since Sunday, he sounded angry instead of pathetic. "You're enjoying watching me suffer." "Yeah," I admitted. "I am. For 8 months, you and Amy enjoyed making a fool of me. Now it's my turn." Ethan's face twisted with rage, and for a moment I thought he might take a swing at me. I almost hoped he would, but he just stood there, breathing hard, before turning and walking away. I watched him go, feeling nothing but cold satisfaction. The golden boy was finally learning that actions have consequences, and some things can't be fixed with charm and apologies. Saturday morning brought news that Amy had moved back in with her parents in Hartford. Sunday, I heard that Ethan had been kicked out of the family business. Our father had made it clear that there was no place for him in a company built on trust and reputation. The chase was over. Both of them were running now, trying to escape the consequences of what they'd done. But in a small town like Millbrook, there's nowhere to hide from the truth, and I was just getting started. 2 weeks after the dinner, I was settling into my new routine when Tony burst into the apartment with news that made my day. "You're not going to believe this," he said, practically vibrating with excitement. "Amy and Ethan are back together." I looked up from the laptop where I'd been working on a data recovery job. "What do you mean, back together?" "I mean together. Margie from the diner saw them checking into the Riverside Motel yesterday afternoon. Same room they used to use for their affairs." I had to laugh. "So now that their secret is out, they're trying to make a real relationship out of it?" "Looks like it. Word is they're planning to move away together, start fresh somewhere else." The idea of Amy and Ethan riding off into the sunset together should have bothered me. Instead, I felt a familiar cold satisfaction. They had no idea what they were in for. "How long do you think it'll last?" I asked. "Without the thrill of sneaking around? Without the excitement of forbidden love?" Tony grinned. "I give it a month." He was optimistic. I gave it 2 weeks. The affair had been built on lies, secrecy, and the rush of betraying the people who trusted them most. Take away those elements, and what was left? 2 selfish people who'd proven they couldn't be trusted, trying to build something real on a foundation of deception. But I wasn't going to just sit back and watch them implode naturally. They'd taken 8 years of my life, destroyed my family, and humiliated me in front of everyone I cared about. They deserved something more active than passive observation. The first crack appeared exactly where I'd expected it to. Amy had always been high maintenance, used to having someone else handle the practical details of life while she focused on her career and social status. Ethan had always been the golden boy, used to having things come easily, used to being admired and respected. Now Amy was unemployed and unemployable in her field, her reputation destroyed. Ethan was broke, cut off from his family business, reduced to doing odd jobs for cash. Neither of them was equipped to handle adversity, and they certainly weren't equipped to handle it together. I started hearing stories within days. Arguments at the motel loud enough for other guests to complain. Amy screaming at Ethan about money, about his failure to fix their situation. Ethan shouting back about how she'd seduced him, how this was all her fault. The romance was dying fast, replaced by the ugly reality of two people who'd destroyed their lives for a fantasy. But I wanted to speed things along. The opportunity came when Tony mentioned that Ethan was trying to sell his tools to raise money. As a contractor, his tools were his livelihood. Selling them meant he was truly desperate. He's asking way too much, Tony said. Nobody's going to pay retail for used equipment, especially from someone with his reputation now. What if someone made him a fair offer? I asked. Tony looked at me suspiciously. What are you thinking? I'm thinking Ethan needs to learn about consequences, and I need some new tools. The next morning, I drove to the Riverside Motel. Ethan's truck was parked outside room 12, the bed loaded with toolboxes and equipment. A handwritten sign read, "Tolls for sale, serious inquiries only." I knocked on the door. Amy answered, looking even worse than she had at the hardware store. When she saw me, her face went through several emotions: hope, fear, anger, desperation. "Jack, what are you doing here?" "I heard Ethan was selling tools. I'm in the market." Ethan appeared behind her, shirtless and unshaven. The golden boy was definitely tarnished. "You've got to be kidding me," he said. "Business is business." I pulled out a roll of cash, money I'd been saving for a vacation Amy and I would never take. "I'm prepared to make a fair offer for the whole lot." Ethan's eyes fixed on the money. I could see the war between pride and desperation playing out on his face. Desperation won. "How much?" he asked. I named a figure that was exactly half what the tools were worth. Fair market value for used equipment sold in desperation, but far less than what Ethan needed to get back on his feet. "That's insulting," Amy snapped. "Those tools are worth twice that, to someone who has time to sell them piece by piece. Maybe. But you need cash now, don't you?" I looked around the shabby motel room, taking in the unmade bed, the empty pizza boxes, the general air of defeated desperation. "How long can you afford to stay here while you wait for a better offer?" Ethan and Amy exchanged a look, and I could see the calculation happening. They were probably down to their last few $100s, maybe less. "I need time to think about it," Ethan said. "Offer's good for 1 hour," I replied, checking my watch. "After that, I'm going to look elsewhere." I walked back to my truck and waited. Through the thin motel walls, I could hear them arguing. Amy's voice, shrill with panic, insisting they could find a better deal. Ethan's voice, defeated and practical, pointing out that they needed money now. 45 minutes later, Ethan knocked on my truck window. "Deal," he said. I counted out the cash while he loaded the tools into my truck bed. His hands shook slightly as he took the money. Whether from anger or desperation, I couldn't tell. "This doesn't make us even," he said quietly. "Not even close," I agreed. "But it's a start." As I drove away, I caught a glimpse of Amy in the motel room doorway, watching her new life with my brother crumble in real time. The tools were just the beginning. Over the next week, I made sure that every potential employer in town knew exactly who Ethan Harlan was and what he'd done. Small towns have long memories, and nobody wants to hire someone who can't be trusted. Amy fared even worse. Her reputation in the IT field was destroyed, but she had no other marketable skills. The woman who'd once managed six-figure security systems was reduced to applying for retail jobs, and even those dried up once word spread about who she was. They lasted exactly 13 days as a couple. The breakup happened in public, naturally. At the diner on Main Street, where half the town could witness Amy throwing her coffee in Ethan's face while screaming about how he'd ruined her life. "You said you loved me!" she shrieked, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You said we'd build something beautiful together." "That was before I knew what you were really like," Ethan shot back, wiping coffee from his shirt. "You're selfish, you're demanding, and you're crazy." "I'm crazy? You're the one who threw away your family for 6 months of sex." The entire diner went silent. This was better than cable television. "At least I had a family to throw away," Ethan snarled. "Your own parents won't even talk to you anymore." Amy slapped him hard enough that the sound echoed off the walls. Ethan grabbed her wrist, and for a moment it looked like things might turn physical. Then he seemed to remember where they were, looked around at the dozen pairs of eyes watching them, and let go. "We're done," he said quietly. "We've been done since the day Jack showed those videos," Amy replied. "We just didn't want to admit it." They left separately, Amy in tears, Ethan in stony silence. The diner buzzed with conversation before the door even closed behind them. I heard about it within an hour, of course. Tony called me at work, barely able to contain his glee. "It's over, Jack. They're finished." Amy checked out of the motel this morning, And Ethan's been drinking at Murphy's since noon. Where did she go? Nobody knows. Just loaded her car and drove off. Didn't say goodbye to anyone. I felt a moment of something that might have been pity, but it passed quickly. Amy had made her choices, just like Ethan had made his. They'd gambled everything on a fantasy, and they'd lost. That evening, I drove past the Riverside Motel. Ethan's truck was still in the parking lot, but the room was dark. Through Murphy's bar window, I could see him hunched over a drink, alone at